Welcome back, everyone. Jamie here again from the CRC for Water Sensitive Cities. I hope that you thoroughly enjoyed the keynote speech from Herbert Dreisaitl and the intro from Mike. I know I certainly did. Now we're into the main body of day one, which is our site tours. I'm hoping by now you've had a chance to have a look at the virtual site tours which are on our website. There's 6 there, plus an extra bonus one, which is the Royal Park virtual click around site tour. These sessions which we have now, they'll run every half an hour. They're a question and answer session, so they assume that you've already had a look at the site tour and have had a bit of a think about what you want to say. But don't worry if you haven't viewed the site tour. You've got a chance now. Duck out and go back to the main homepage. You'll find the virtual site tours there. The site tour for Aquarevo runs for about 15 minutes, which means you've got time to watch it and then come back into the Q&A if you want. But for those who've already seen it, I think we might get started on our first Q&A. We have 3 guests joining us today from South East Water. I can see on my screen I've got David Bergman, got Ninad, got Terry. I might get the guys to introduce themselves. David, do you want to go first? Perhaps let know people who you are and what your connection is to the project.
Yeah, thanks, Jamie. I'm the Research and Development Manager here at South East Water, and with Terry and the rest of the project team have led the development of a lot of the technical solutions, the remote monitoring and control for the Aquarevo site. Maybe I'll hand over to Terry.
Ability. This project started in about 2012 and I was part of that then and been part of the project right through until now.
And Ninad, do you want to introduce yourself, please?
Thanks, Jamie. So this is Ninad. I'm a research and development engineer, and I've worked quite extensively on the product development side of the rain to hot water system that's used or is being used at Aquarevo.
All right, thanks so much for joining us. We have about 20 or so minutes left before the next Q&A starts, so we've got plenty of time to explore things in as much detail as we like. Watching the site tour video, the thing that really struck me, the thing I'd like to explore first is perhaps to go to where we are now with Aquarevo. The CRC and University of Melbourne and South East Water are all involved in a project looking at misting, which I think is really innovative. It connects some of the technology there with the new livability drive and is, I suppose, a new area for South East Water. David, do you want to give us a bit of background on where this misting project came from and perhaps what South East Water is trying to achieve?
Yeah, the roots of this project really go back to the early days of Aquarevo, and I think in the video we talked to the research synthesis project. And I struggled with saying that in the video too. So the research synthesis project that we did with the CRC and other collaborative partners at the time, Terry was there as well. That actually predates my involvement, where we really did look at what we would like to achieve in terms of the cooling and the greening environment within Aquarevo. So in recent years, there's been a big push to get people into the houses, the rainwater, hot water system, saving up to 70% drinking water. So now we're at the research stage of really seeing what we can impact around the house in terms of the landscaping, irrigation and misting to cool the surrounds of the house, leveraging the research of the CRC and trying to apply that now in a real house setting. So with the sensors and the climate station we have there, with the expertise of University of Melbourne to really study that space with a goal of, can we roll that out and further across the estate and other estates. So we've got soil moisture sensors, air temperature sensors, wind speed, really looking at human thermal comfort factor in that environment as well to see what kind of a difference we can make.
So an obvious question for me, or perhaps for others as well, David, or to Terry, why South East Water? Why are you guys looking at urban cooling and those sorts of things as a water utility? I think that's interesting in its own right, and perhaps to break that down a little bit.
Do you want me to do that one, Terry, or do you want to go?
Give it a go, David, I reckon.
So why are we as a water utility looking at
it's a novel thing.
Cooling?
It's not what you guys would traditionally do, and in some ways you're not the only ones doing it, but it's just really interesting to see government-owned water utilities getting into this space of saying that water has broader application. It's not just for drinking, it's for all sorts of other things, and you're testing the sort of services that you guys offer. This is a new kind of direction in some ways.
Yeah, no, I think the way you've put it there, Jamie's, it's really looking at how we operate as a water utility. If we wanted, we could stick to the basics of supplying drinking water and taking sewage away, but it's really looking at our broader opportunity as a water utility to impact the community and, well, our customers live in that community, and how can we improve their lives. Water is every part of the environment. The keynote speaker that we saw just before this, very inspiring in that space. And it's really South East Water trying to see with the types of water at our disposal, and that's what we've been doing in Aquarevo. It's the rainwater, it's the storm water through the wetlands, it's the Class A recycled water. How can we put that to an outcome other than just drinking or bathing, and actually seeing if we can impact the environment around us. So if we think kind of some of those broader climate change trends, the heat, the warming of our environment, the urbanisation and the density, we think we really need to use our water differently and better. And one of the kind of the hypothesis we have here is that water is cheaper than electricity. And I think certainly in a climate sense, you could argue it probably is that too. So if we can use water that has fallen on the Aquarevo site to cool its environment, I think it's a much better outcome than using electricity to do that.
Yeah, that's good. And a question for you, Ninad. It also strikes me that this is perhaps a new direction for utilities like South East Water in the technology space. I've spent most of my life working for utilities and those sorts of things, but this is a whole new level of tech that you guys are exploring. Any sort of comments on that, or where you see this Aquarevo project going from that tech point of view and what that means more broadly for South East Water?
Us at South East Water, we are quite blessed in that sense. We get to explore these unconventional technology related areas through our product development and development programs. Just as part of that, these urban cooling sensors and the Aquarevo rain to hot tech has come out of that product development and research and development program. So I think, as much as the hypothesis and that research which David just spoke about, that needs to back up the technology development which goes along with the project. So I think it will be interesting to see what results we actually get out of our scientific research, and pretty much that will drive the technology and product development in the future for us.
Thanks, Ninad.
Jamie, got something there. When this started, some of these things weren't on our radar what we were going to do, but we got a project that's about 11 years so far, and you have the opportunities to evolve and do things. So over 11 years, we are doing different things that we planned for back in 2012 to 14. That's the beauty of this project. The Aquarevo house is now R&D centre, so we can do these things, and things will evolve further as we introduce more technology.
Great. Well, I've got you, Terry. There's a question on the chat line that asked about the beginnings of the project, and particularly how something as innovative as this was actually funded and financed. And I know that there's an interesting backstory in that, where the money came from. Are you able to share any light on that?
Well, it's an R&D project, so we started back in 12 with the intention of doing things to the land that we own. So we could have sold the land, but we thought, no, we can do things better here than rather than just sell it and get a commercial value with it. We can do it better, develop it, and the money that's raised out of the project goes back to R&D as well. So it's funded in that sense. So the broader rate base paid very little to this project, so it's funded internally.
All right, I've got a couple of interesting questions here on the chat. The first one is the types of technology that we have at Aquarevo, the rainwater, hot water, torque tanks, those sorts of things. Is that just for new houses, or can you retrofit that to existing houses and buildings? Yeah, David,
well,
do you want to answer
Yeah, I'll start and I'll invite the others to add to it. All the houses in Aquarevo are new builds, and it's obviously easier in terms of installation to put that on a new house. Through the construction process and through Terry's team, there's a lot of coordination work goes on with builders to get the cabling in at the right times, get the equipment fitted, all within the builder's schedules. We have to work in with that. So it is easier in a new build. We have on a number of test sites retrofitted this to other houses. So it is possible to do it in that sense, but definitely easier if you can plan it in right from day one.
Ninad or Terry, did you want to add to that at all?
Yeah, if I can just add, so David's spoken about the rain to hot, but if you look at the urban cooling sensors that we've been developing, they are not so much dependent on whether or not the property is getting built or it's already built. So these are meant to be basically installable in any backyard of any sort of house. It doesn't have any special requirements which need to be looked after at the building stage of the property. So it's basically a plug and play.
Great. Some other questions coming through from the chat. It's been running for a number of years now, Aquarevo. So the question is, what have you learnt so far as a pilot project that you're looking to hopefully replicate in the future? What's worked well, what hasn't worked well? And if you're going to do it again, what would you do differently? I know, Terry, would you like to perhaps start that one off? You've been there from the beginning and you know where the bodies are buried, I suppose.
Thanks, Jamie. One of the things we would do differently would be closer involvement with the builders. Whilst we work with them now to install our kit on the houses, I think we would stipulate early on that we would want a 8-star homes to be built right across the estate. We didn't do that early on, back in about 2016 when the first houses were being planned. But we would do that now. In fact, the last stage we are doing that. We're insisting on stage 7. Sustainability rating of star 7 and above to be built. So that's a learning. We would do things differently. So working closer with the builders, and if we do it again, that's what we'll be doing.
Yeah. Ninad or David, do you have any lessons from your point of view, maybe from an R&D point of view or a technology point of view?
Couple of things come to mind. One is, I think, the involvement of councils throughout the process. I think we would, if we did that all over again, we'd probably go twice as hard in effort-wise to doing that. A lot of effort went into engagement with councils, and I think any future development will need that involvement, and the learnings we can share will be important to that. I think some of also then the technology testing and development, the risk approach that we took to some of that, we had to be quite extreme in that, and now the data that we're getting out of that can mean that future rollouts won't need to be quite as risk averse, because we have the data to prove that it actually is safe and ongoing. So there's been a fair bit invested here that will pay off in the next phases.
Okay, thanks for that. Another question from the chat came in about the uses for things like rainwater and stormwater. At the moment, as you said, David, we're using a hypothesis that water is cheap in electricity, and we're assuming that for that project that water is unlimited. But if you did have to choose between the different uses that you've got out of Aquarevo, so rainwater to hot water, or rainwater for misting, or rainwater for irrigation of gardens and things, any early insights on how you might prioritise those sorts of things?
I'll add a comment, then maybe Terry might want to add on that. I think the use of the rainwater into the hot water system has made for a very consistent demand. So that's made rainwater and rainwater tanks, and then their impact on stormwater and local waterways much easier to manage and predict and control. So I think that's been a good priority use of the rainwater, just for that consistency in demand. Rainwater around the garden, very weather, climate dependent in that sense. So much easier knowing that it's got a daily routine to it.
Terry or Ninad, did you want to add to that? Any perspectives on which is the best use for that water, if there is indeed competition for it?
You go in art, and I'll
Yeah, so the approach that we've taken, particularly at the Aquarevo house, where we've got the irrigation system as well, that's the technology itself acts as an optimizer, and it actually chooses the appropriate water source between rainwater and recycled water as far as the irrigation system goes. Rainwater, preferentially, it's used for the rain to hot system, which is supplying rainwater as hot water to showering, bathing, and laundry applications. Whereas the actual irrigation system, as a priority, again, it uses rainwater if it is available, but that sequence of priority is lower than what it is for the rain to hot. And if the rainwater is not available, then it switches over to recycled water. So that's a secondary source of water to back up rainwater for irrigation system. And I think part of what we are learning is whether that optimization can work, because short term it's sort of making sense that it should be like that. But I think since this is a long-term research project, in a matter of few months or even a year, we would have a good grasp on what sort of optimization is the magic formula.
In addition, some context around the amount of water of this development, which is quite a lot when you consider the water recycling plant which we built into.
Oh, Terry seems to have frozen a bit there. We'll see if he comes back in. All right, look, we might apologise on Terry's behalf or on his internet connection's behalf. We might move on. Look, I've got a question here from the chat that I might read out. It comes from Glenn. It says, would you have a comparison of the estimated cost for this development type versus a typical development, minus the costs associated with the heavy lifting and the proof of concept work? So I suppose it's asking, for all the new technology and things, how much extra, what does the cost look like compared to BAU? Do you have a good idea of the business case for this?
If Terry can answer this, he would be the best one to answer that, but I think we might be having a connection issue with him. Or are you back, Terry?
I can hear you, David, but no one can hear me.
Okay. Yeah, no, you're back, I think. The question was about the business case for it all, and the costs.
That's right.
So I didn't hear the question. Sorry,
the question again, Terry. Glenn has asked, would you have a comparison of the estimated cost for this type of development versus a typical development, but obviously minus the costs of the heavy lifting and the research up front? So if you remove the research element, how does this sort of stack up compared to business as usual approaches?
Yes, we had to over-specify the rain to hot system, and David know all about that. And that's because of the drinking water guidelines of the Department of Health. So we put in more barriers there and more technology on that to prove that it can work. So if you take away that, and if you had different drinking water regulations that exist in different parts of Australia, but in Melbourne it's quite rigorous, then those costs would be reduced. But we do have costs per property on what all the kit contains, and we're trying to then work out, we'll take away that R&D, what is it we've developed that we could take elsewhere to other developments. We've got other developers, builders who are interested in taking this technology elsewhere. So we're trying to commercialise that.
Okay, thanks. A question that I had, again, I've been involved with Aquarevo for a number of years. How is the technology and the approach going with the residents that are now moving in? What sort of feedback are you getting and what sort of level of engagement with this novel approach?
I might be best to answer that one, I think. So when a customer moves into the house, we do an induction with them. So we go through the whole process of all the initiatives they have, and we explain it all to them. So we give them a whole lot of information during that induction. So they're very pleased with what they're experiencing so far. We've had no complaints. There's a few tweaks on some of the system, which is normal.
Been positive, but identified some opportunities for improvement, and that's the great thing of actually having the data and monitoring and controlling it. We do know exactly where we're at, and we can improve that. In terms of rainwater usage, again, we know how we're tracking with that. Terry might want to add some comments on that, and it's going well towards our predictions, but perhaps not quite there yet, with still some more optimisation and education involved with some of the homeowners. Terry, do you want to add to that?
Just with the alternative water use and the claim of up to 70% reduction in drinking water demand, we've got some houses that are achieving that, some houses less so, so we're looking at why that is. We need about a year of data to go through that seasonal change, and so some houses have been there for 12 months, some houses are more recent, and we've got to also take away the usage during the time when the house is being constructed, which would be different usage when you've got occupants in there. So we need about another year to really analyse that data of a number of houses, but we're getting a big range between up to 69% and down to about 30%. So we're looking at why there's a difference there, but we've got to look at it over a long period of time to understand that completely, to take away that seasonal factor.
Very good. All right, look, thanks, guys. We're actually out of time now. Our 30 minutes for Q&A has disappeared. It went quickly, didn't it? So thank you, Terry, thank you, Ninad, and thank you to David, and thank you to South East Water. I know that if you go to their website, you'll find more information about it, including I had sent through this morning live data on some of the misting and the temperature stuff. So check out South East Water's website. Thank you, guys. Next, we're going to throw over to the Bendigo case study. So that's it from me, and I shall see you a bit later on. Thank you. Bye.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Bendigo site tour Q&A. Thanks very much to Jamie and the previous panel presenters for the Aquarevo site tour, which is very exciting. Just to let you know, if you haven't watched the site tour video on Bendigo, you have time to go and do that now and then come back and join the live tour, as it's about a half an hour long. The link's on the main page of the website. It's a virtual tour button, and then just scroll down to the Bendigo one. I'd like to welcome our subject matter experts. I'll start with you, Liam. You can introduce yourself and talk about your connection to this project, and then Jane, you can go after.
Yeah, thanks for that, Beth. Good to be here. Thanks for joining in. Liam Sibley. I work for the City of Greater Bendigo as a Senior Water Strategy Officer. My role is to help coordinate the implementation of Reimagining Bendigo Creek. And I suppose Reimagining Bendigo Creek is sort of building upon all the good work that Jarrarung started with One Yarrabilba. So over to you, Shane.
Hello everyone, my name's Shane Anstey. I'm a project manager at Jarrabilba Aboriginal Corporation working for JANDAC, or the enterprise. My role was working through the Wanyuram-Delk Good Water Hole project on country at Knight Street. Project ran for 2 years, and it's been pretty important and pretty integral to a lot of ongoing works, and potentially linking back to the Reimagining Bendigo Creek project.
Excellent. All right. Well, we might get started then. I have some questions that we can start with. So I was really interested in all the different stakeholders that were involved in this project, working with the Jara people and local government, and then yourself with the, is it Jaja? I can't say half these words. We're wrong. Enterprises. Yeah, thank you. How did it come about that everyone started working together, and then once it was going, how did that go?
Look, the funding sought that we work with our partners, and partnershiping with government agencies is can be difficult, can be problematic, especially when you're an Aboriginal corporation. Having a clear understanding of kind of cultural etiquette in a way has been something that we've really tried to enforce and educate our partners around correct etiquette in engagement. When the project started, we really relied heavily on our partnerships with the North Central CMA, DELP, the Department of Environment, Land, Water and Planning, the City of Greater Bendigo, who actually participated and pitched in and really showed a role of engagement in doing the on-ground works with JANDAC. We also had engagement with school groups, etc., to do on-ground activities and pathways projects. So a really long answer to a short kind of a question, but it is really quite a challenging subject, is to get everyone on the same page and to understand the levels of education that need to be provided around the subject matter. So it's been challenging, but well worth it.
So is that education on both sides?
Definitely, because
Or more educating
because we're relying
us?
on.
Sorry, go ahead.
Look, I think no, you're right. I think as things have progressed, we're really understanding the levels of education around cultural education and cultural etiquette, and the way that Jandak are a traditional business. The way that we do traditional business on country is very different to a model that the government agencies have, and it's trying to incorporate those models together to get an outcome, which has been really challenging. But I think through the last, several years, at least 4 to 5 years, we're starting to refine that process and work together better, which is, we're seeing, say, some great outcomes with the projects that we're doing at the moment.
If I could add a bit to Shane's comment as well, because Shane and some of his colleagues started everything with one Yarrabilba, which was really the momentum that I suppose Bendigo Creek needed to start healing. But this sort of attracted interest from many stakeholders, but probably DELP and the City of Greater Bendigo saw an opportunity to do a co-design process to create a plan that could bring all the stakeholders together. DELP provided funding, and then the city co-facilitated a process to develop Reimagine Bendigo Creek. And through this process, it was months and months of coming up with a strategic plan, so everyone was sort of working towards the same objectives. Without people like Shane helping to facilitate the involvement of Dja Dja Wurrung, these sort of projects wouldn't have got the momentum that it has today. And we're in a really nice spot at the moment, because we've got multiple organisations wanting to implement this project, and we're all pitching in to try to take it to the next step. We're supported by some high-level governance structure as well, which just sort of makes talking at CEO levels a bit easier, because they've got this forum to keep this thing going. So yeah, it's in a good place, I'd say, Ben.
Okay. So back to some more technical questions, I guess. So how do the frog ponds fit with the rest of the creek project?
I'd say essentially we're looking to improve water quality. You can't treat the water quality as a single issue. We need to look at wider strategies and wider inputs, such as sediment. And removing the sediment from the in-stream is critical to creek health. It's also critical to, when we talk about organisations and partnerships, it's critical to Jandak that they have and are able to meet their cultural obligations to heal water. And by healing water, partnerships grow, people grow, culture grows. It sounds like a really simple approach, but by allowing sediment to drop out of water, we are passing on water that is in better quality, water that'll allow for invertebrates to come in, allow for frogs to come in, birds, and then the animals come in. So we have an improved water structure, improved water conditions. Generally speaking, the whole environment and the community will flourish.
All right. We have a question here about lessons about the Indigenous environmental plantings and what should we be doing differently?
I'm sorry, there was a lag
Shane?
there.
Oh, that's okay.
I'm sorry, there was a lag there.
Well, that's okay. The question was around the lessons of Indigenous environmental plantings and what we should be doing differently.
I think what we need to be doing differently is engaging traditional owners in their traditional lands. The plants used within the Wanyarram Delk project and possibly the Reimagining Bendigo Creek project are all the types of plants that used to be in that area and that are used and recognised for that kind of practice. What isn't recognised is the cultural element tied into those plants, the cultural story tied into those plants, the cultural recognition tied into those plants, the use of those plants on country, and the stories tied in to cultural practice and the use of those plants. So really, it's broadening the story and deepening the story of the relationship of how to improve the environment through the lens of, in this case, Jarrah people, which has a much richer return.
Excellent.
Definitely.
All right, well, we might cross to Perth where we have a live person question.
Apologies if this has already been asked. We haven't seen some of the question and answer discussion. The question is, how do you determine who are the traditional owners who can speak for country, provide their knowledge, be a decision maker and an advisor?
Aboriginal Corporation, we worked closely with traditional owners. In this case, we worked with a internationally renowned master weaver, Auntie Marilyn Nichols, who has the education and the cultural authority to advise on the project and the plantings. I understand the cultural sensitivities around who can share knowledge in this space, and I understand that that can be quite a layered process. But fortunately for Jandak, we had someone so renowned and so knowledgeable around the use of plants on country that we quickly snapped up Auntie Marilyn, and she was a real driving force and continues to be a driving force around all revegetation activities to do with water and all revegetation activities on country involving Jandak and her mob, women's business. So, yeah, I suppose we're really fortunate to have Auntie Marilyn Nichols in that space.
Excellent. I just wanted to make a note here for anyone who wants to participate in the next site tour, the Yarrabilba one. I would hop, and you haven't watched the site tour yet, I'd hop off now and do that now, and then you'll have enough time to get to that one.
No. Bad advice. Stay here.
So what's next for your guys' projects? I mean, this is obviously a fantastic project, a great project that highlights working with all relevant stakeholders and having a fantastic outcome. So what's next?
I'll start, Shane, but please add further to it. So Jandak and the City of Greater Bendigo and North Central CMA are doing a project together for in-stream works. So we want to start, I suppose, healing the creek as well. Jandak's already done a really good start for that, but we've got kilometres and kilometres of stretches of creek that we need to revitalise. And I suppose what's next is trying to do it collectively, so that we're all sort of in the project together from day one, and we can have a shared delivery model. And this will sort of, leverage, say the money that local government has and, the authority as well, but then also empower the Dja Djurrung to heal the creek and, create employment opportunities, but also have that bring in culture and get people back in the landscape. So that's, having a key focal project is really, really integral. And it's, I suppose, us just learning how we effectively collaborate. Because we've done bits and pieces, but, collaboration's an ongoing skill. And you need to refine your processes, how you work with one another, and just continually build that trust so you can go be in it for the long haul. So that's one of the key things. We've got a couple other little side projects as well, but that's just getting that momentum. Shane, have you got anything further to add?
Yeah, just after the success of the original One Dog, which you're talking about now, Jandak was successful in obtaining funding of 550,000 to do further in-stream works at the Bendigo Creek, putting in a rock and riffle to trap sediment, taking out some of the heavy sludge and sediment within the creek, removing clots within the creek, and as the traditional owners have said, reintroducing music back into the creek, which has been so silent for so long. In addition to those in-stream works, which are unique to Jandak, but also within the Bendigo Creek, we've also done similar works downstream from this project, doing very similar works, trapping sediment through stormwater and reusing stormwater for the benefit of the broader community, but also for the benefit of the Dalkunjajar Country Plan. And Jandak have really forced ahead because the traditional owners know what they want. They're really interested in achieving on-ground objectives. They're not so much interested in the talking, they're interested in the doing, and that's always a fine balance within government organisations is having the right amount of consultation and following procedures and process, and then balancing out the return country for Jarrah mob and also for employment opportunities for Jarrah mob to be involved. So this next phase of the Reimagining Bendigo Creek, Jandak have been involved with, and what Liam's talking about here really is limitless with the amount of experience Jandak now has in that space, the amount of experience we have working together with DELP and the City of Greater Bendigo and the CMA. We're really positioned well to start doing some terrific longer term projects.
Yeah, great. One of the things I really noticed about the language that was being used in this presentation was around healing the waters or healing the waterways, and that they weren't in balance. And I just thought that was such a lovely, way to talk about the rivers. Like, I mean, it's true, but it's not how we generally talk about them. And I just thought that was, it was a really kind of nice twist about how to imagine rivers, I guess. So with that in mind, how would you, what would the traditional owner approach to water and country mean in urban catchments? So how do we bring that language and that thinking to the urban catchments?
So within the urban catchments, that's where a lot of the pollution is within these systems, because the further you go downstream or the further you go upstream, the better the quality. So when we're using that kind of language around healing water, essentially that's what the traditional owners want. They want water that is in healthy condition. They want a waterway in an urban environment where they live to be reflective of their cultural expectations and their cultural obligations. So there's an obligation to pass on clean water. You can't pass on clean water until you've had an opportunity to heal the water. Healing the water is quite a really simple process, slowing the water down, putting food and fibre plants in there, having the sediments drop out, having other pollutants drop out. And using that language certainly gives a different tint on what we are looking at in terms of managing water on country. And Liam will have a different perspective on that from the city's point of view, which is great. But from Jandak's point of view, the healing of water, healthy country, healthy people. We need to get those three things into balance.
Yeah. And reflecting upon my exposure, I suppose, to the Judge Rung and their language and their wisdom, it's, I think it's so much easier to comprehend healing a creek as opposed to say, we're going to improve the water quality of a creek. The cultural lessons that I suppose that I've been able to receive through Shane and others is, they simplify a very technically based system. And anyone that's been trained as an engineer in science, which I'm assuming there'll be a few out here today that are, we've overcomplicated language through our learnings. So it's almost about removing some of that, those biases with how we speak, and just getting back to simple terms. And then we can reach out to the wider audience, because I think any community member will generally struggle with that technical language that the practitioners come up with. We just need to keep it simple, keep the cultural messages coming through, and it's a way of engaging the heart and mind.
Mm-hmm. I hear you. So my understanding is that this project came out of the water-sensitive Bendigo project. Can you talk a little bit about that and any highlights that came out of that?
Yeah, I suppose they're interconnected rather than it comes out of it. And it's water-sensitive Bendigo is, it has unfolded since the CRC for water sensitive cities did their research project to develop a vision and transition strategy. And they essentially from developing that strategy, Bendigo got all its partners together and developed this governance structure called Water Sensitive Bendigo. And this group is 9 different organisations that are working towards delivering innovative water practices in Bendigo. Reimagine Bendigo Creek is sort of like one of the focal projects. It's not the only thing, but it's a key focal project. And I suppose with any cross-organisational group, you always need something to focus on. Otherwise, it just becomes a talk fest. So Reimagine Bendigo Creek's providing that focus for us right now. And the various organisations have been trying to work together to get funding to do the next stages of work. And it's just these collaborations that allow us to sort of keep taking the next few steps. Does that all make good sense, Beth?
Yes, it does. Another question around the issue of dogs and litter that was brought up during the video. How do you plan on dealing with that?
So we're actually onto that now with the support of the City of Greater Bendigo in terms of, one is signage, but also is trying to educate the wider public around the background of the site, why the site was developed, what the meaning of the site is through interpretive signage, but also trying to put up some in-stream barriers that support perching of birds, areas for turtles to lay on, areas for fish habitat, which essentially means more logs, etc., in these areas. So we're hoping that kind of combined effort will stop animals, in particular dogs, getting into the area and fouling up the water. There's plans for significant investment back into these sites into the future. So we need to be just mindful around protecting this special use zone. I think that's what it's going to actually end up becoming, a cultural hub, a cultural educational centre that'll need to be afforded probably different management moving forward, considering the context of the site. And we look forward to working with the City of Greater Bendigo and achieving that for not only the Jarrah members, but also for the wider community, because it's a multi-use area.
All right. Are there any, so that sounds like a bit of a community engagement kind of aspect to that as well. Is there anything else that is part of this project that deals with community engagement?
One of our partners that does some really nice things is North Central CMA. They've got a citizen science program that's looking at the health of Bendigo Creek. And they've got 10 active community members that are regularly monitoring sites. And this is a really good way of getting people involved in the health of the creek and how it changes over the system. We're going to include them into the video, but there's so much of a story here that we just couldn't fit it all in. But there will be further details about that. They've also checked out the website. They're doing some really great stuff with citizen science. But yeah, we'll need to think of new things as well. And I'm sure Shane, he's probably got ideas as well of how you bring the community along the journey. Because, we've got good 20 years of work, and we're not going to do it alone. We need to bring an army with us.
Well, just on that point, Liam, I think around some of the customary practices, such as cultural burning within that landscape, cool burning over the winter period, will offer an opportunity for the wider community, but also for our partners to see how cultural use and cultural and traditional use and practices can be played out in an urban context. And I think once we get over that little hump of reinterpreting how to manage country through the lens of Djadja we're going to see a lot more of community engagement and also government engagement around the outcomes associated with these projects. At the moment, there's still not enough kind of, like you're saying, engagement or signage or interpretive signage, or enough kind of clear focus to say, this is the site, this is the activity, please come in and enjoy. This is a reconciliation act. We're trying to reconcile the Djadja Wurrung. We're trying to work with our community. We're trying to work with the broader community in the region. Please come along and enjoy the space and work with us and get some cultural education while you're here.
Excellent. Was there anything a part of the project that wasn't in the video that you want to talk about now? We have about 2 minutes.
Shane, do you want to kick off, or?
Yeah, I could quickly go. What we ran out of time on this project in particular was doing some cultural layering. So we're actually working with the City of Greater Bendigo and DELP on working with Kappagatchin Water Advisory Group on doing some cultural layering to the site, which is really exciting, which is really going to actually start to build that community awareness around the site and what it's used for, and start to build an area that's going to be a cultural hub, not only for the Jarrah mob, but also for the wider community in the region. We're going to end up with quite a really well invested site that is going to be quite different to what it is now, but the theme of the site will never change. We're going to look at incorporating places for people to enjoy the O'Keefe Rail Trail, but a space also for people to come and enjoy cultural practice and cultural interpretation.
Yeah, it's going to be an amazing site once it gets to that next stage, like having dance circles and places for ceremony. Yeah, it's going to be so cool. So very exciting times for the Djadja Wurrung and the broader Bendigo community. I suppose just one reflection to add, Beth, as well, is just, working with a traditional owner group to drive this project has been the most, I suppose, rewarding aspect of all this journey. There's a complete different way of looking at things, and it sort of has been, really enlightening. It's been times where there's been tensions and stuff like that because we're all learning at the time, but it's been a process that, I think we're all more mature and got a better understanding of how we can actually work together. Without, I think to do this process without the traditional owners leading it, it wouldn't be the success it was today. So I think it's been amazing to be a part of it.
Awesome. Well, I think we'll leave it there. Thank you very much, Liam and Shane, for your time and your insights on the Bendigo project.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for that. It's great to be a part of it.
Time now for our second Q&A for our site tours. Hopefully by now you've had a chance to watch the site tour for Yarrabilba in Queensland. I'm going to throw now to Ben Firmage, who's our Chief Executive Officer, CEO of the Water Sensitive Cities CRC, and Ben will be hosting this session. So Ben, over to you. Thanks.
Thank you, Jamie, and welcome everybody to our discussion around the Yarrabilba case study. With me, we've got the two stars of the case study, Karen Greaves and Nick Smith. So before we dive into some questions, maybe Karen, you'd like to just introduce yourself again, and then Nick, if you'd like to provide a brief few words of introduction. Over to you, Karen.
Which means I'm specifically the development. So I look at everything from Yarrabilba being a master plan communities through to retirement living and urban regen. So a lot of my time at the moment is spent on Yarrabilba, and it's something that I'm really excited to be part of.
With Yarrabilba from the early days, I suppose, of development, before there was a single excavation dug on site, and we've primarily been doing the stormwater and flood planning for the site in terms of water quality and obviously the flood management. And it's been, from our point of view, a really exciting journey as well, seeing a large patch of land going from a pine plantation, what it was, to now becoming a town. So it's been a really, really interesting 10 years for us.
Thanks, Nick. And just a reminder, as Jamie said, if people haven't had a chance to look at the case study just yet, I'd encourage you to do so. Jump in, have a look, because you've still got time to have a look and then come back and ask any questions you might have for the panel. But maybe we might open up the question firstly to you, Karen. There was mention of the circular economy in the case study and the role that water is contributing to that circular economy. I wonder if you could sort of provide a little bit more information on the circular economy strategy for the site for Yarrabilba, but maybe what it means for Land Lease as well.
Yeah, so about 3 years ago, we started looking at, I guess, Yarrabilba in its context. 2042 is the time that we finished out there. So what does a city or a town of the future look like? And that kind of took us down the path of looking at circular economy. And when we say circular economy, we're actually looking beyond just materials and waste. So for us, it's all the flows in and out of our community. So we developed a strategy working with Aquarevo, who were the circular experiment up on the Sunshine Coast, and also Ricardo Energy and Environment. And we look at circular economy in terms of waste and materials, water, energy, agriculture, and transport. So for us, this concept of how do we actually capture and collect and reuse water within our site, as well as the obvious materials path that most people are familiar with, is something that we've set as quite, I guess, ambitious goals. And it's really interesting to look at it from that perspective, because, it does open so many opportunities, and it really does remind everybody that everything is so interrelated. So, when you look at some of the amazing things we've done on site, not only are we getting a water outcome or a flooding outcome, but we're also getting biodiversity, we're getting reuse of materials. It's really, I think in the world of sustainability, and having been in this space for sort of the last 15 years, I think it's a really exciting change in this sort of, it's really back to putting my engineering hat on. It's a systems thinking rather than looking at things from a specific issue.
Yeah, great, thank you. And I'm interested in, we've got a question on the chat about place-based planning, and wondering how ideas of circular economy come together with creating a fantastic place where people want to live and work and raise a family.
Yeah, I think place-based planning is definitely something that everybody's talking about at the moment. And, it's really, once again, down to how do we use this approach to circular economy to make people want to live at Yarrabilba? So, it really takes sustainability out of the space of looking just at saving energy, saving water. And it's really about how do we then keep money within our economy? How do we create jobs? You create jobs, people want to come to Yarrabilba, you get these out, then that sort of allows for the focus on, well, how do we create the places that people really want to be within our space. And, some of the places Nick and I took you to, they are just amazing, built environment outcomes in terms of, the cool and the contact with nature that they provide within what is otherwise, residential houses. So I think it's gaining traction and popularity in that sort of language, because definitely when I started talking circular economy 3 years ago, I got a lot of eye rolls and people looking at me going, I've got no idea what you're on about. But I think it's now becoming mainstream, which is, really exciting.
Yeah, it's fantastic, isn't it? Sometimes it's not until people can see it, but and in its full entirety in a particular place, that it becomes real for them. Fantastic. Nick, you've had an opportunity to be involved with this site for nearly 10 years now, I think I heard. Are there any reflections any learnings that you've had over that period that you think might be useful for the people tuning into this session?
Well, I think one of the really interesting aspects of the stormwater side of the planning and design of Yarrabilba to date is that most of what you saw on the virtual tour is actually work that was done well before the circular economy concept was brought on board to Yarrabilba. So we were very much doing the, I guess we can call it now, conventional water-sensitive urban design approach to meeting our stormwater quality and flooding objectives, and trying to integrate open spaces with our stormwater management systems. But what it has allowed us to do is to have essentially a bit of a head start of what a conventional system is designed and operates like, but now how we can use it as case studies like we are to then build on top of that and really look at the additional benefits and the additional outcomes that might come out of it. So from my perspective, we've created these spaces now that are, I guess, great resources to go and study with a new lens and look at how new interactions and a lot of the knowledge coming out of the CRC to look at the additional benefits which we might not have realised when we were designing them 10 years ago or 5 years ago. So I think that's a really important outcome of all of this. And we're only up to precinct 3 of Yarrabilba, and there's, as Karen said, there's a couple of decades left to apply learnings and really take it beyond what we even know now. So look, plenty to learn. We've learned a lot in 10 years, but we've got a lot more to learn still, and I think that's going to be the most exciting part of it.
Fantastic. That idea, because if I heard correctly, it won't be fully developed until around 2042. So as you say, this process of experimentation and learning and building that learning into the next stages, I'd be really interested in some observations on how you've done that to date and how will you do that going forward as well. So maybe, Nick, do you want to have a first go at that one, and then over to you, Karen?
Yeah, I guess probably picking out one of the key aspects that was raised in the virtual tour was how we were using the existing sort of vegetation and drainage lines on site, parts of the vegetation that were either retained because they had to be under protected vegetation, or just seeing the opportunities for certain corridors to be retained and in part naturally regenerate. And the, I guess, 5 to 10 years on in some of those corridors, the value that's coming out of those now as a public open space resource and a cooling resource and a visual resource for anyone who lives opposite or nearby these corridors, I guess they're something that now we're starting to say to some of the urban designers and planners for the future precincts is, let's try and recreate these spaces because we know they are valuable, albeit some of them were, I guess, incidental, and we were just trying to protect areas, but we've also tried to expand some of these corridors. And they, I think, in the ever increasing urban areas, those green corridors and those escapes for people to come away from the urban mass and come to these corridors, that's something which we really need to recognise and I think take the value more broadly into Yarrabilba, because it is going to be a very large development, and that means a lot of roof and a lot of roads. So use our green spaces as much as we can for as many uses as we can, and I think that's what we're really now. We were doing it in part by accident, but now we really need to be quite intentional about it.
Fantastic. Karen, any thoughts to add to that in terms of, from your side, from a developer's point of view, how do you sort of learn as you go and adapt over a project that will have a very long life?
So I guess one of the advantages we have with Yarrabilba is that because of the timescale and the fact that it is a priority development area, is we're really using this as Lend-Lease as a test bed. So it's our innovation space. I call it my giant sandpit. This is the project where we test things that might not otherwise be commercially feasible, or sometimes it's just a big picture idea that we've gone, hey, let's try this. So for us, it's a constant evolution. So we do whilst we have a master plan over the entire site, we do the detailed master planning as we draw down and buy a precinct off the landowner, and as we start to go through that. So we're in the process of doing that at the moment with our next precinct, and there's a lot of learnings coming out, what we've done in precinct 3 and 2 and 1 that we actually draw on and say, well, what worked, what didn't, what do we want to try next, and how do we really learn from the good and the bad, acknowledging that sometimes we don't get things right. So it's really, design is such an iterative process. And, when you've got 30 years across a project, there's so many things that you can draw on and look towards the future as well.
Fantastic, great. I might just pause there and see if anyone from our WA site has got any questions. Doesn't look like anyone's coming through at this stage. So, because that's fine by me. I've got a long list. This is a fantastic, really appreciative of the chance to ask the questions. One thing that did strike me was the importance of community in this case study, both and history, I guess. History in terms of that connection to Indigenous culture, but also there's some European history there as well. So, Karen, I might ask you to just sort of tell us a bit more about the process of bringing particularly the Indigenous culture in. And then, Nick, I might ask you to talk a little bit about the more challenging part of the history, the fact that you're dealing with a former pine plantation, with some pretty significant issues there. But maybe let's have a talk about Indigenous, Karen.
Yeah, so Yarrabilba has an amazing heritage, both from the Indigenous perspective. So Yarrabilba means place of song. It was a meeting place for mobs throughout the area. So our traditional landowners found, when they were doing our site surveys, they found artefacts that were not associated with their family group, but with others. So what we discovered as part of that is we found some rock shelters on site that were used as part of this meeting place. And these were incredibly culturally significant and were almost, people didn't realise they were there. So, it really has that beautiful overlay, and it's something that we work really closely with our traditional landowners and also our community to help them understand the significance of it and what it means. We've then got an overlay, so we've got that cultural traditional landowner piece. It then was Camp Cable in World War II. So it was, for anyone who's a military history buff, this was a place of great significance to the American military during their campaigns. And we have got photos of what was actually there on site. And then it became, part of our Queensland's pioneering history with agriculture and the Hancock brothers running the palm plantation. So we're kind of weaving aspects of this through the project as we go, because we're building a community where nothing existed before. So because it was a pine plantation, there was nothing on the site. So we're bringing people in and really allowing them to kind of create the next piece of history, which is what is Yarrabilba and how did it come about and what's so amazing about it. So, it's just incredible to work with that sort of background.
How did you bring that expertise? Sorry.
How do we bring it in? So we work with our stakeholders. I know that prior to when I joined the project, our development managers, they contacted the... Sorry. Our development managers contacted the American, military and actually found out who was it that was serving there. So the Red Arrows were one of those that were there, and we've named streets after them. So we've, same with our traditional landowners. A lot of our streets and parks are named after words that feature within their language. So it's really, I think, it's not just us creating this community is what it comes down to. It's us working with existing communities, working with with those who've got the connection to it to create this next piece. So it's probably one of the more exciting aspects of the project is you just don't know sometimes what we're going to uncover and what it's going to mean to people in the area.
Fantastic. And Nick, before we dive into the sort of technical challenges, I guess, but maybe I'd be interested in your thoughts about that sort of connection to history, both Indigenous and European. How did that sort of play out in your thinking about designing the different parts of the site?
Look, it was, I guess, again, quite interesting from the start, an exciting site to be involved in and, with all of those historical layers, right down to to the point where being on site with the civil contractors when we were actually turning dirt, that there was actually things being turned up, almost daily in some parts, particularly from the military history, because there was so much, stuff left behind, and whether it's bottles or dog tags or whatever, there was an accumulation of that history purely in the construction during the construction phase. More broadly from the cultural heritage side, when we did, commence on site and start designing on the site, what we were basically presented with is very much somewhat of a blank canvas. Being ex-pine plantation is how we saw the site when we started. So there wasn't too much inspiration from an ex-pine plantation. It was we started touching on, there was not much there, and there was not much left in the soils by the time we started down that path. So, but in recognising that it's a big site in the natural landforms, and the proximity to the Plunkett Reserve, which is where those very significant caves are. You're always designing in the shadow of what place used to be, and I was lucky enough to actually be taken up to the caves and shown and talked about what those caves meant by one of the local Aboriginal representatives, and they are prominent. They are the highest part of the site, and you can see them from many areas. It's just there. It looms. It probably didn't directly influence what we were doing in the ex sort of plantation and drainage lines, but it's an underlying sort of thing that really informed the site, I suppose.
Yeah, thank you. I've got a question on the chat talking about the balancing the challenges of strategic planning versus just getting approvals sorted and projects continuing to move. I wonder if I could get your thoughts on how we strike a good balance between the challenge of making space for innovation and creative thinking versus running a business essentially. And maybe also, as we've got about 5 minutes to go, I can't let you go before I ask a question about your thoughts on how do we scale some of these innovations that we're seeing at Yarrabilba up, and so that they can become part of mainstreaming a mainstream approach to these sorts of developments. But maybe Karen, do you want to have a go at that one first?
So I won't lie, it is a challenge. It's I think probably more so with Yarrabilba at times, because we are a priority development area, which means state government are our planning authority. So in a perfect world, they have the say on what we can and can't do, but then our assets get handed to Logan City Council. So we work with Logan City Council really closely around this, because we want to make sure that what we're handing them as assets are assets that they can maintain and fit within their scale. So sometimes that is the biggest barrier to innovation, is just weaving your way through the regulatory barriers, and even just departmental, water is one of those ones where it covers multiple parts of a local council. So whether it's parks, maintaining and operating sports fields, through to the water side of things. So it's one of those things that I don't have an answer yet. Would love to have an answer around how we actually strive to actually achieve some of these. I know that EDQ are great with us around that innovation piece, and they're happy to really support us and push us, but sometimes it does come down to if people can't or don't understand why we've done something, then actually operating the asset becomes much more challenging for them. So it's it's probably one of my biggest bugbears at the moment, is trying to navigate through that. But I don't think it should be a barrier. I think it's just, I guess what we're looking at is, can we actually use it as an opportunity, as Yarrabilba, as an opportunity to test some of that and break down some of those barriers, so we can, achieve these amazing outcomes.
And I guess I think you were talking about that in the context of water, but when you connect that into circular economy, does that sort of multiply the challenges?
Yep. because you're dealing across, you know, waste collection, whether it's through parks or through houses. You're looking at electricity supply and networks. You know, it's basically, you know, you end up with touch points with all parts of the Queensland government as well as Logan City Council. So, you know, I think we are ambitious and we are pushing hard, but at the same time there has to be that element of understanding the context in which you're doing, because from a sustainability perspective, the last thing you want is an amazing outcome that actually isn't then feasible in the long term. So, you know, we're really focused on you know, creating things that are going to be there when we as Lend-Lease leave, because this is our legacy and we want to make sure that it will survive post 2042 when we've not got an active presence.
Fantastic, thank you. Okay, great, Nick. A thought from you on if you could change one thing that could make life easier in terms of scaling some of the innovative approaches that you've applied in Yarrabilba. What would you change?
Well, I guess to probably almost flip that, I'd say that we've had a really good opportunity here at Yarrabilba, being essentially a single landholder and being able to implement things at a regional and precinct scale has really been beneficial for us in terms of planning and design, because as we saw in the virtual tour, the Buxton wetland is one of those things which we, I guess, were able to conceive and design many years in advance of the actual development front catching up with it. And those sort of opportunities are not easy to do when there are multiple landowners involved or a local government who, you know, can't necessarily approve things across someone else's land. So that's been really beneficial on this site. We've been able to think on a big scale and plan over many hundreds and many thousands of hectares, essentially. And that's essentially what the master plan, sort of infrastructure master plan has done that. And I know those things get done through local governments, but the implementation of them is often stifled by the fragmentation of land ownership. And I think that's a really good, something I guess I'm quite lucky to be involved with, and I wouldn't change, is to have that bigger single umbrella of being able to implement things well in advance of when they're potentially needed, and being able to get benefit from them. You know, as I said in the virtual tour, we use some of our wetland areas for numerous years for water source before they were even needed as stormwater quality management, and that's a massive saving for construction water. And we'll look for opportunities as we move forward into future precincts for doing that exact thing again. Is really using what we have, which is huge canvas, to get maximum benefit for the longest amount of time.
Fantastic. With 50 seconds to go, does anyone want to have the last word in terms of, you know, the key message for this? It sounds like the key message for this project has been that it's been a fantastic opportunity to test some innovative thinking at scale, and hopefully and over time as well. So hopefully the experience from Yarrabilba provides a great sort of light on the hill for other developments to follow in the future. I hope I've done justice to the work. Great. So Karen Greaves and Nick Smith, thank you very much for taking the time to help us develop up the case study and to answer the questions today. It's a great project, and we really appreciate you making the time to help us out. Thank you very much.
Thanks for the opportunity.
No worries. Right. And it's back to Jamie, I think, for the next case study. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Ben. Awesome. We've just finished. We're about halfway through our question and answer sessions for the site tours now, so things are going well. We've got short breaks in between just so that we can transfer over between the states. So what I'm going to do now is just quickly transfer. Our holding slide will come up, and the next East Village site tour Q&A will be with you shortly. So now's a chance to go and grab a drink, grab a sandwich if you're at lunchtime in your state, and we'll see you shortly. Thank you. Hi, welcome back. We're back now with the East Village site tour question and answer. Apologies, that delay was slightly longer than necessary. We just had some internet bandwidth issues, but we're back on track. We've got with us now 4 presenters from the video, and also from Development WA, the agency which is behind East Village Knutsford. What I might do, and Jamie's my name, by the way, for those who haven't met me before, from the CRC for Water Sensitive Cities. What I'll do is I will get the other presenters, the other people on the Q&A call, just to introduce themselves. First of all, I might reintroduce Mike Moritz, who's with the CRC and at Curtin University. So, Mike, I'll throw to you. Do you want to give yourself a bit of an intro for those who are watching?
Yeah, hello. And, thank you. This is Mike Moritz. I had a minor involvement in the East Village design process and then helped write up the story about what East Village has the potential to illustrate. So, thank you.
All right. Thanks, Mike. And you can tell it was Mike's bandwidth that was causing us some issues before, but that's all right. We'll push on. Josh, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Thanks, Jamie. Josh Byrne, Director of Josh Byrne Associates, or JBA for short. And we were appointed by Development WA as the landscape architects, sustainability consultants and urban water consultants for East Village.
Fantastic. And speaking of Development WA, I'll now throw across to Warren. If you could perhaps introduce yourself.
Yes, good morning all. Warren Phillips. I'm a Senior Development Manager with Development WA, responsible for East Village at Knutsford.
Thanks, Warren. And then lucky last, Greg, your turn, please.
Thanks, Jamie. Greg Ryan, Sustainability Manager with Development WA. Also involved with the CRC RAP here and the infill research project, which we'll be hearing about later in the program, I believe.
Very good. All right, let's jump into some question and answers. Again, for those who've been part of the other site tours, you'll know the process, but for those who are joining us for the first time, just a reminder that you can put your question into the chat on the CRC's website, which is where you're watching us now. Just scroll down below the video and the chat function is there. And if you're live at the Crown in Perth, we certainly welcome you to stand up and say your question to the camera, and we can forward that to the presenters as well. Very welcome to do that. Look, one of the things that I might start off with, this is, I suppose, a question I have over here east in Melbourne that we hear quite a lot and we get told quite a lot about the differences in climate and the differences in water conditions and therefore the differences in approaches that we need when we go over west to WA. So I suppose the question I've got is, what do you think is different about the water management approach at East Village compared with what we might do over here in the east? Maybe Mike or Josh might like to field that question to begin with.
Shall I kick off, Mike?
Yes, please do.
So I guess the main difference is climate and soil type, and the fact that we have a superficial aquifer. So obviously Perth is a classic Mediterranean type climate. We have cool, wet winters with good rainfall over the months from sort of May, June through to about September, October. But then we have a long, dry, hot summer. Couple that with our very sandy soils over most of Perth, so in particular what we call the Swan Coastal Plain. You have high porosity of soils, very low soil moisture and nutrient retention capacity. So it means when you couple the hot, dry summer with soils that can't hold water, we tend to have highly irrigated landscapes, which is one of the main reasons you see Perth household water use being much higher than other parts of the country, particularly southeast coast of Australia. And the fact that our stormwater drains mostly on site, and again, particularly in these highly free-drained areas on the Swan Coastal Plain. So we manage stormwater very differently. It's a localised infiltration approach as opposed to using surface drainage.
And Josh, what's the implication for that in terms of water management practices? A lot of people watching today will be from the east coast sort of cities and will be quite familiar with the design of water-sensitive urban design or recycled water projects and the things. What do you do differently, or how do you think about projects differently? You're a consultant that designs these sorts of things. Just to help people get their minds around how you approach the East Village challenge, I suppose.
Sure. Well, I guess from a water supply perspective, when we look at non-drinking water sources, groundwater is the source of water that is normally utilised for irrigation. Of course, we have a drying climate, the superficial aquifer, which is the groundwater source that's normally drawn upon for public open space. There are deep aquifers also, but it's normally the superficial that's used. In our drying climate, we have to be very mindful of how that aquifer is managed, because with less rainfall, we're seeing less recharge of that. So that's the first thing to consider. It shouldn't just be there as an expectation that you could use it in an uncontrolled manner. The other thing, of course, with having access to groundwater is that it really has held back the greater uptake of larger viable recycled water schemes from recycled wastewater. And that's why we see, really no good examples of that in Perth and Peel. There are a few small pilots, but nothing of scale. And that's something that has to be addressed in the years ahead as we continue to see a drying climate. The other thing is with rainwater, so that's obviously water off the roof as opposed to stormwater coming off the grounds. People have often thought that rainwater doesn't make sense in Perth because of our Mediterranean climate, but that's actually not the case. It's all about how do you capture and utilise that rainwater when it's available, i.e. during the late autumn, winter, early spring months, and how do you match that with internal demands where you can match time of availability with time of use. So they're probably the major differences. And then, of course, when we look at how we manage stormwater as far as infiltrating on site to recharge the aquifer, to try and recharge soil moisture, but also be mindful in nutrient-sensitive areas as to how we ensure we're not putting nutrients into the groundwater, which often then ends up becoming expressions of the water table in wetlands, and then also into the Canning and Swan River system. So it's about both water and nutrient management on the Swan Coastal Plain.
Thanks for that, Josh. Look, Mike, as a fellow researcher involved in numerous CRCs and the like, one of the questions one of the points that Josh just made then is that we don't see quite as many local scale projects in Perth as we do in some other cities. It's a growing phenomena rather than one that's perhaps well established. What do you think we can learn from East Village about particularly local scale reuse, local scale on-site type things if we wanted to scale up water sensitive cities in the West? Mike may not have heard that. Other panellists can feel free to jump in if they have an opinion on that. So the question was, what can we learn about small-scale systems from East Village, Knutsford? Greg, do you perhaps want to have a go at that one from Development WA's point of view? What you particularly wanted to hope to learn out of it?
Oh, sorry, you weren't picking up Mike then?
So the question was,
No.
Josh raised the question or raised the possibility that we don't have quite as many small-scale water systems in Perth as we do in other cities.
Correct, yes.
So this is an opportunity for us to learn and scale up those sort of systems as I suppose, an alternative, another way of thinking things, just another option on the table there. What do you think we're hoping to learn from East Village, in particular, about small-scale systems?
Well, particularly the use of rainwater on strata type development and community bore. Those both non-potable sources of water, which are going to significantly reduce the potable water demand at East Village. So that is a live case study. I think there'll be a lot of interest in the data coming out of that, and what's been modelled is, as Josh mentioned, I think up to an 80% reduction in scheme water. So that type of thing, across strata, and particularly with the new community title, which we haven't had previously, presents opportunities to scale those kind of systems up on precincts across buildings, potentially. What Josh was alluding to, the larger scale recycled water schemes, we haven't really found the sweet spot for that yet in WA, but perhaps that's the next leap.
Okay, thanks. And maybe to you, Warren, to continue on from that, from a development typologies, we've got some new approaches to lot scale design and public realm and those sorts of things. What are you hoping to test in the market with this East Village project?
So East Village is 1.5 hectares, so considered a small infill project. And I guess an opportunity to show in those smaller infill settings how we can still, implement these precinct scale infrastructure. We've got a shared battery. We've got a strata-owned bore. We've got a shared EV charger, a shared electric vehicle as well. We're actually sharing that battery and sharing the groundwater scheme across to 2 apartment buildings which are adjacent to the 36 townhomes. So I guess for us it's about how infill can be done well with really well irrigated landscaping, still lush and green but with smaller lot typology, a lot less public open space but very good quality strata space, which we call common area. That's really the target, I guess, with this project, is to show how infill can be done well.
Yeah, great. And you alluded there to the strata bore and the community battery and the like. I wasn't entirely sure, and maybe you could explain a bit more on who owns and who maintains those common assets into the future, because I'm sure there's lots of people thinking about that in the future, whether it's a battery or a stormwater system or a cycle water system. So yeah, what's the ownership and the governance around those assets?
The strata bore is owned by the strata company that runs the 36 townhomes, and that's a slightly different model to what we used at Whitegum Valley, where we handed over the bore to the City of Fremantle. So this one was really to trial how that model could apply with the strata being in charge, and that's working well. Also, we've been able to get agreement from the 2 apartment developers that will be developing next door that they will pay for use of the strata bore. So that also creates a bit of revenue for the strata, or some cost offsetting for the strata for operating that bore. The bore was sized so that it could be used for all the public, private open space across the whole 1.5 hectares. The community battery is slightly different. So that model is actually a commercial model where the battery is owned by Power Ledger, a WA blockchain energy company, and they will purchase excess power from the 36 townhomes and also from the apartment buildings from their solar systems, and the residents will buy back that power after hours at a preferred rate as well.
Yeah, okay. So this sounds like a fairly mature and a fairly complex business case that was put together. Did Development WA lead that business case and that value proposition, and perhaps I suppose reach out to Power Ledger and the others? Who did that work?
Yeah, so it was a huge collaboration with Curtin University, with all our consultants such as Josh Byrne and Associates. We obviously collaborated for a long time with Power Ledger. There were some other organisations involved. The opportunity for the large-scale battery, and it is a 670 kilowatt-hour battery, that really came about through the federal government's Smart Cities and Suburbs funding. So the whole of the Knutsford precinct and City of Fremantle, more generally, were actually part of a Smart Cities trial that looked at the use of blockchain for energy trading. And we're also able to incorporate into that research a look at the water needs for a particular redevelopment precinct, which we call Knutsford, which is basically in the City of Fremantle, about a kilometre from the city centre. The whole model was a collaboration, I guess, and the opportunity to work how we could better use energy and water, and look at what sort of precinct scale infrastructure would be suitable for such a small precinct, but what opportunities there would be, and what would be commercially viable, I guess.
And just to sort of pursue that with one more question, do you think you've learnt any lessons about that so far, about what you would do again or what you wouldn't do again? Maybe it's too early days, I don't know, but it's just a question to ask. Yeah,
look, at this stage, the lessons are all positive. We've actually been probably a little bit surprised at how easy it was to get. So the 36 townhome development, strata development, that was one that we're actually sort of in charge of, I guess. The 2 apartment buildings will be privately developed, and To our surprise, the apartment developer came on board very quickly, wanting to be part of use of the bore. They wanted their residents to have access to the battery, and were very keen to get Power Ledger on board to operate their energy trading platform. It's been to date overall a really good experience. I guess it's early days in terms of the maintenance and the ongoing costs of operation, but at this stage everything's tracking as per the modelling. So it's something that we definitely want to obviously continue to look at and make sure that it does perform and operate for our residents in the best possible way.
Great, thanks Warren. I'll give you a break. I'm going to redirect the next question towards Josh. In the video we heard about water sensitive urban design being specifically targeted to recharge the groundwater, not only to passively water the trees and the vegetation, which sounded fantastic, but specifically to do that recharge, which we know is so important in the West. You also talked about the palette of trees and things and starting to bring food production in. So I suppose my question to you is, when thinking about water and landscape design and water sensitive urban design, these two new objectives of recharging groundwater and food production, what does that innovation look like? You're starting to push some boundaries there and do some things that you wouldn't have otherwise done. I'm just wondering if you could explore what you actually did a bit more and why you did things.
Thanks, Jamie. Well, I guess firstly, when we look at the stormwater recharge, the fact that we have polypore stands in this part of Fremantle and good opportunities for localised infiltration, that makes sense. That stacks up quite easily. The nuance really is how do we make sure we get all those light rainfall events directed into landscaped areas where soil moisture can be recharged around root zones to really help with the long-term health of trees. The larger events then go into infiltration galleries that are distributed around the site. So perhaps more mainstream thinking is that all stormwater events go to a series of small compensation basins or infiltration galleries, and they're grouped together just for ease of planning. But basically you get all events going into one recharge point where we take an approach of trying to diffuse that water across the landscape, treat the landscape like a sponge, and try and make sure that you benefit landscape plantings and soil surface area by those regular rainfall events. And of course that leads to both transpiration and evaporation, which helps with local cooling. Now when it comes to landscape plantings on a site like that, it's all about getting plenty of canopy in. As Warren mentioned, whilst there is no strict public open space because of the abundant parks that are in the immediate area, the focus is on high quality public realm. So it's the shared landscaping. So there's basically, because it's a strata operated arrangement, a strata road that reads a shared space between vehicles and pedestrians, the public access ways that work throughout the development to provide good linkage to the surrounding area. These are all landscaped in a way where over summer you get almost 100% tree canopy once the trees are established, but through careful selection of species with deciduous trees in the right areas, it means that we still get winter solar gain into the northern elevations of homes. We make sure that the roofs aren't shaded so solar panels get sun year round. So it really is, I guess, just thinking about dealing with stormwater and landscape design and public realm at the same time. These are not discrete things to be addressed separately. It's part of a systems approach to how we design these urban spaces.
Time has whizzed by, so that we do have to kind of wrap it up a bit now. So I might take the opportunity now to thank the speakers that have been involved. Thank you for a great video. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It's particularly interesting to see some of the technology. It's not just East Village Knutsford, it's Aquarevo, and you can start to see some real patterns emerging across Australia with some of these sort of things. So thank you again to the speakers. What we'll do now is we'll close off this question and answer, and we'll have a short break again just while we bring the next lot of speakers in, and we'll start that one again shortly. I think the next one up is Wharf Street, again in WA. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye for now. This one here is the question and answer session for the Wharf Street Wetlands in Perth. This is a feature in the City of Canning. City of Canning have been a long-time supporter of the CRC and of water sensitive cities research. So we're very, very proud to showcase this project. But for those who've watched all of the site tours, you might notice this one's been a bit more crowded than others. We've got a cast of thousands that have been involved. We've only got some of those presenters here today just because we'll run out of screens otherwise. What I'm going to do now is I'll throw across to our regional manager, Beth Salt, who's in Sydney, and she will lead the question and answer for this session. So Beth, over to you. Thanks.
Thanks, Jamie. All right, so like Jamie said, we have a huge crew of people here, so we might start with introductions. Let's start with the three people together first.
My name is Gary McCulloch. I'm the Senior Project Leader for the Canning City Centre Regeneration Programme, and have been involved with the delivery of Wharf Street Basin.
I'm Rachel Williams. I'm a Sustainability Engineer at the City of Canning and was part of the Wharf Street Basin project team as well.
I'm Giles Pickard, Landscape Architect at City of Canning, and along with my teammates, we helped deliver the Wharf Street Basin project.
And I'm Peter Adkins, Manager of River Systems at Department of Biodiversity, Conservation and Attractions. I've had less to do with the Wharf Street Smart Park, although I had a watching brief on it, but more to do with the Wharf Street constructed wetland downstream.
Excellent. Well, we might dive in then. One of the things that really struck me about this project was all the stuff you managed to pack into that Wharf Street wetlands. So there was augmented reality, there was water quality treatment and stormwater management, free Wi-Fi, viewing platforms, a canoe launch, so many cool things. What were your favorite things and what was missed, do you think? What else could you have packed in?
Good stuff. I mean, if anything, I think our project team were really happy with what we delivered. It was actually above and beyond what we had originally anticipated in terms of the augmented reality wasn't part of our initial brief. We had a really limited land area and also, like any project, limited budget. So to be able to deliver our bridge, boardwalk and all the other landscape features, I think it was just fantastic. And picking a favourite one, it's too hard. If anything, I think the mural that Rachel was instrumental in delivering was one of the key heroes to the site, but I could also say that about the wetland treatment system or the shelters and other things. How about you guys?
I think one of the key things, there's a lot of things in the park, but you've got to take it back a little bit. This park has been there only for the last 6 months or so as an open bit of parkland. For 60 years, it was a fenced-off drainage basin. People walked past that for 60 years, never looked in. The biggest risk that we undertook was taking the fence down. So it took a long time for the city and our project partners, Water Corporation, DBCA, and DEWA, to come to terms with what the realities were of taking a fence down around a drainage sump, steep-sided, to allow access through with families with children, to go in and out of that park, to experience a lot of the technology that we brought together through a very large partnership. You've alluded to the number of people involved. This project wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for Water Corp, who owned the asset, and also the federal government Smart Cities funding, who gave us $1 million. And with that comes a lot of eyes across Australia to deliver something that's quite unique and special. So a lot of people and a very long time project in the gestation. Mike Moritz is involved. We should say that JBA were the designers, so Josh Byrne and his team designed this project. So for me, what I'm proud of is that we've actually delivered something completely unique for Canning in an area that's been a strategic metropolitan centre for over 30 years and had very little investment. So leading the charge from a local government perspective with a lot of our partnership groups to deliver something unique is what I'm mostly proud of.
And I think one of our aims was to build a connection with water, with the community, but we had a dilemma where we didn't actually want a physical connection. We didn't want people dabbling in the water because of the contaminated nature of stormwater. So we had to try and build into the design a way that we can bring people into the site and feel like they're connecting with water without actually touching the water. And the way the boardwalks have been constructed out over the water, I think, is a really important way to do that.
So it's great. It's great to see the what's the outcome of the Wharf Street Smart Park back in 2008, when the Wharf Street constructed wetland, which is downstream of the Smart Park, was implemented. We considered undertaking works in the Wharf Street compensation basin, but at the time it was too challenging from a usage of that land perspective. But the Water Corp and others have really come on board to try and open up these sites through their Drainage for Livability program, so that we can get great benefits from these really what are underutilised sites, and they should be used more coming into the future.
That's right, Peter. There's a hectare of land that is suddenly now available for use for the community. And I think the challenge in undertaking a project like that was really looking. I mean, we talked earlier about pilot projects. This is a pilot project that was enabled by the funding from federal government and the local government having a plan for this area within the Canning City Centre regeneration program for years. We brought it on because we got the funding early, and that helped us to really just concentrate the minds and actually deliver something which took a lot of thought leads, I think, to come up with a solution to make it work. So it's pretty exciting.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I think as well, the enabling environment that the CRC for water sensitive cities has created in Western Australia through just the collaboration, through helping to with the water corporations, many programs including Drainage for Livability and the Water Sensitive Transition Network. It's just created an environment that has supported these projects to actually be enabled finally. Also with the Canning City Centre vision as a water sensitive city, it just creates this enabling environment that allows these projects to move forward in what would, and certainly was, a challenging project, but wouldn't have happened without that environment.
So one of the things Gary just said there was before about taking down the fence, and that really mirrors the keynote presentation we had today about taking down those fences and bringing people to the water. And I believe in the discussion after the presentation there was someone who said, how do we do that here in Australia, where we have a lot more regulations around things like that? So how did you guys go with that side of things, with the actual legalities and technical, that side of actually taking the fence down?
Well, it's like any project, and we've heard some really exciting projects, but we've been through the process of having a lessons learnt. There's always the public lessons learnt, and then there's the private lessons learned, and the project team's real understanding of what's enabled this project to come to fruition. And there was a lot of internal workshops, including every stakeholder, about risk. Risk was the biggest concern from fairly risk-averse companies like a water corporation, very risk-averse. City of Canning Council, very risk-averse. So to get the council on board with the concept of what it actually takes to deliver something like this, it meant that we had to go through many presentations to council and others just to get them comfortable with what we're doing. So the design of it, the JBA design, Josh Burns' company's design, to enable us to institute safety measures that Water Corporation would eventually approve. There is a fence around it, but the design of the fence, the steep banks, how do we mitigate against those things? It's a long process, and it's not an easy process. We talked again, and I'll mention this pilot project. This taking a vision and a concept to delivery through those regulatory hurdles, the multitude of stakeholders that all have their own vested interests. It's not an easy process, and I think it brings out that you need resilience, and you need to really be able to take practical solutions to what are some of the sort of design intricacies of delivering something like this. So they're quite complex. I mean, at the end of the day, it's just a park. We can say that. To get to the point of view where people can walk and enjoy it has been through 2.5 years of hard work, and everyone in this room and others in the other room have worked to make it happen. So we're proud of it.
I think all the partners were committed to making it happen as well. We were hitting little roadblocks as we went, but everyone was committed to make it work. So we were able to find solutions to whenever we hit those roadblocks.
And so for 2 years, we had a partner working group, every key stakeholder involved in a meeting, discussing design issues, discussing risk issues, bringing presentations to the group to enable everyone to have a full understanding of what we're doing and how it's going to be done. We made Water Corporation, who are the asset owner, who also a financial contribution to the project as well, the chair of that group, to make sure that within large organizations like Water Corporation that are quite layered in different functions, that they had a really key role in delivering this project from design through their operational structures to make sure that it happened. So, yeah, look, everyone's got to, everyone within the partnership group had to take responsibility and push hard to make sure this happened. Any one organisation couldn't have done it. It needed everyone to work together to make it happen.
Yeah, and from a design perspective, I think it was, as Rachel touched on before, with the boardwalks and also the bridge that overlooks, and you can directly be across the water, you can look down and see the wildlife. That creates that connection when we weren't physically able to connect people with water. I think it's quite interesting then when you look at the Wharf Street wetlands that are only a few hundred metres away, how they're actually able to connect people to water and to the Canning River without some of the restrictions that we were faced with due to the site's ownership and management. So, yeah, I think that overall just connecting people through visuals and through the signage we put in, but also just by creating a beautiful landscape really does help to bring these sites to life.
I think one of the other partner groups that's worth mentioning, because it gets to why are we doing some of these projects? I mean, there's a lot of reasons why these kind of projects are undertaken. But in an urban regeneration context, it's capturing the social return on investment of these types of projects. So we've got Curtin University doing a research paper, which has been funded in part by federal government, in part by the City of Canning, for them to look at the impacts of this kind of proposal or this kind of project on the urban regeneration, the investment attraction, and the social return on investment post-completion. So that's an ongoing piece of work I think is going to provide some quite interesting information for us and a rationale for why across Australia we should be doing more of these quite complex and hard projects.
Definitely. Do you have anything to add, Peter? Can I move on to another question? Sorry, I feel like you're just kind of sitting there by yourself.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I guess all of what the guys have said is true and holds true for all water-sensitive urban design projects. I think having the partnership and those from those different disciplines as well is really critical, so that the appropriate people in the appropriate organisations can assist in getting the projects up. Because they can sometimes be challenging and can get tripped up by different parts of a particular organisation. So very important.
Awesome. All right, Peter, I might stay with you because I have a specific question that's come through for you. The Woodstock treatment train described in the video, can this be scaled up to a large urban area? Can it be retrofitted into existing urban catchments?
Potentially. I guess everything depends on site-specific conditions. So the Wharf Street constructed wetlands over a 4-hectare site. It includes a number of different elements, open water, subsurface flow water areas. We found they're particularly useful just to provide that the different redox conditions to remove different species of nutrients. And so by the time the water passes through the wetland, it's of a much greater improved quality. There's no reason why it couldn't be scaled up more broadly. In the Wharf Street constructed wetland, we included some grass on top of the subsurface flow wetland to provide some public open space. So you could potentially have ovals on subsurface flow wetlands for treatment and also storage of water. I can't see any reason why it couldn't be scaled up more to a catchment scale. I guess it just comes down to the catchment specific requirements and what people are looking for.
All right. One of the other questions that has come through, hold on a second. We'll keep going with you, Peter, sorry. Is there a maintenance regime for the below ground with subsurface flow path, or is it self-regulating?
Look, the material used in the subsurface flow wetland is 20 to 50 mil diameter laterite aggregate, so it's a pretty coarse aggregate. And there's sumps on the upstream and downstream sides of it where water can sediment can be removed. They're also in the middle of the treatment train, so sediment isn't a huge concern from a maintenance perspective. So the maintenance regime on them is pretty minimal, aside from sort of the above ground, just maintenance of plants and removal of weeds and the like. But they are pretty self-sufficient. Large flows go around the subsurface flow wetland components as well, so that there isn't scour or they don't overflow. And there's also water level adjustments on the inlets and the outlets, so we can have water at a particular level for plant establishment, or if we want to get rid of weeds or the like. So it's pretty well set up to be pretty well self-sufficient, but it can be managed as well.
Excellent. Cool. One question that has come through is the smart data aspect park. How is the data being used? And is there plans to scale it up?
At the moment, the data is available on the open source site. It's freely available for anyone to use. So the city itself is probably going to look at it out of interest, but the data is actually available for anyone to use in whatever way they see fit. So it could be used by schools as part of their STEM curriculum. It could be used by universities. We have a university group who's doing a tour in the next week or so. It could be used by researchers. It could be used by DBCA to see what water quality is going to be flowing into the constructed wetlands. So at the moment, there's probably minimal use at the moment, while we're still tweaking parts of the database. But I think into the future, there's a real potential for it to be really widely used by a really wide audience.
Yeah, and the platform that the city created with the live data on the website and also the links into the augmented reality app are really exciting. Just having that data available through sensors. I guess we're also looking at the wet season ahead as stormwater flows come in, being able to actually see the impact of those flows on some of those wetland parameters is going to be really interesting. And just from a, I guess, general sustainability point of view, not having people driving out to then take samples and then driving them off to the lab and waiting to get them processed to see what's happening, to be able to see it in a live way will be really exciting.
Awesome. I noticed in the video that you relocated the long-necked turtles. Is there any other special things you had to do for any other animals that were in there?
It was primarily the turtles, and some of those turtles would have lived in that basin for potentially its whole life. They're estimated some 60 to 70 years old. Did have some. Yeah, so I mean that was amazing in itself, and our fauna consultant, who was fantastic, Mike and Mandy Bamford, they actually said it was a really unique part of the project in the sense that when you normally go in for a development project and you relocate fauna, they're relocated quite often, pretty much in every circumstance, to another environment, which they then have to compete with the existing fauna. So to actually rehome them at a secret location and then bring them back onto site, it was actually one of the highlights.
Turtle Resort.
Yeah, it was one of the highlights of the opening. Everybody wanted to get a hold of the turtle for the opening to release them. But
sure.
Also, we were also really mindful of the impact we were having from a short-term perspective on the biodiversity of the site, even though it only had about 3 or 4 native species there, and we put back more than 60 in terms of plants. But also there's, I think we did relocate some frogs as part of it. There's been talk of bringing some further frog species back as more habitat develops. But we saw it in real time that the habitat islands we created we couldn't actually finish planting one of them because there were a pair of blackwing, is it blackwing or one of the stilt species? They'd nested on there and had young. So the guys were planting were getting swooped by the stilts so before they could even finish planting. So it was pretty amazing to see this constructed habitat become actually, habitable even before we'd finished building it. There was that real need. We've seen many bird species breed out there now. Yet we've seen turtles trying to catch some of the young ducklings, and we've also seen things like wood ducks try and come and inhabit some of the tree hollows that we put back into the site as well. So yeah, it was.
Another neat part of the turtles is that they were microchipped while they were off having their little holiday. So that's going to be part of a research project. So if turtles are captured downstream or upstream or wherever, there's a bit of data about where they've come from.
Yeah, cool. I love it. That's awesome. Well, we might wrap up now because it's 3 o'clock. So thank you very much to Giles, Rachel, Gary, and Peter. And thank you so much for telling us all about the Wharf Street wetlands.
Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Cheers.
You might notice on the webpage we have one final one, which is the Royal Park site tour. We just don't have a Q&A with that one. But jump in, click around, and you'll see it's a 360-degree experience that you can explore yourself at your own time. We're heading to South Australia now to talk about the Unity Park biofilter scheme and MAR scheme and stormwater harvesting scheme. This one's been around for a while, but it shows us a lot about the potential of what can be achieved. I'm going to throw now to Melissa Bradley, who's our Regional Manager in South Australia, and she'll introduce the guests there. Over to you, Melissa.
Thanks a lot, Jamie. So we're joined here today by Bruce Neumann. He's the Manager of Salisbury Water for the City of Salisbury, and Robin Allison, who's the Director of Design Flow consultancy firm who have worked on some of the design features within the Unity Park project. So I'm hoping that you've all heard, watched the video, and you've kind of got this really good overall view of what has been happening at Unity Park. I'm just going to move to the chat. First of all, I just wanted to pan over to Robin and to Bruce and just your reflections on the journey before we open up to the questions of where you've been and where you've come to in terms of the Unity Park project looking back, and what you might change if you had the chance again.
I guess for me, the Unity Park system is, well, it's older than the CRC. It's sort of more than a decade old now. And it did really demonstrate that large-scale biofilters can work in terms of the water quality outcomes, and also maintaining the or getting sufficient flow through them for treatment for reuse, as well as protecting downstream waterways. So that's a good outcome from the project. Obviously, there's a lot more interested sort of maintenance and so on required with biofilters as opposed to wetlands, but they certainly play a role in terms of that large-scale water filtering for reuse, and the water quality results demonstrate that pretty well.
Thanks, Rob. I'm not sure if you caught that, Bruce, within that discussion, but we're just thinking, reflecting back, what are the learnings that you've brought out of the Unity Park project?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so the Unity Park project came about halfway along the life cycle for us. So our oldest scheme actually turns 21 this year. So the Parafield Partners Urban Stormwater Initiative that really kicked us off on a large scale. And we're doing a major refurbishment of it this year, in fact. So Unity Park is about midway, 10 years of operation. It was slightly different to many of our previous ones, and I guess Salisbury has a long history of wetlands and integrating wetlands into the urban environment. So they're a key part of the identity of Salisbury, and people relate to the wetlands very well, and certainly council likes having wetlands as part of its community. It provides so many opportunities for passive recreation and open space and so forth. They're also fairly low maintenance, so I guess Unity Park presented some challenges for us. So certainly the wetlands have gone down very well. We've really had to work with the biofilters to get them accepted by the council people who maintain them. There certainly are a lot more maintenance than the wetlands, and we don't get that same level of integration. People look at them and say, "Oh, that's just a dry old patch of dirt. Why don't you do something there?" So the challenge for us has been to try to dress them up a little bit, make them part of the landscape. We've tried to set up public artwork there, tried to set up quiet areas that people can just sit on a bench and relax. But it certainly has been more challenging to get them into the Salisbury culture.
In terms of managing the wetland system, have you experienced many algal blooms in that Unity Park system? And if you did, how have you dealt with it?
So with the constructed wetlands, we don't often get algal problems, but you've probably noticed there's a little formal lake or an ornamental lake on the edge of the wetlands. And that was there before we actually constructed the wetlands. We do often get problems with those lakes, and often it's just the ducks. The community love to feed the ducks, so grandmas with the grandkids down there feeding the ducks. And so we have attempted to, over the years, different strategies to get rid of the ducks, but the community just love them, so we live with them. And then, of course, we have to live with the consequences, which often means in the warmer months we do get algal issues. However, one of the things we've done is altered the flow regime so that from our initial sedimentation pond, we actually flush all of the stormwater through the formal lake and then into the wetlands. And by doing that, we seem to have eliminated most of those issues.
Excellent. Okay, thank you. And because I'm sure that's a challenge that most of these types of systems come across from time to time. I noticed in the video also that there was a very distinct difference between what the wetlands look like over the summer period and then what they look like when they were fully functioning and full of water, obviously over the winter period with some of those stills. In the prep for the upcoming winter, are you having to do like lots of mass replanting, or do they just self-regenerate? Like what goes on there to take them from that like summer condition to winter condition?
So most of our wetlands, we use just the common reed. Phragmites australis is probably the most the workhorse, I guess, of the constructed wetlands. So that's very hardy, and of course it's dormant through the winter period. It can tend to look a bit shabby at times, and that's one of the criticisms we do get from the community, is that some of our wetlands look a bit shabby at times, and it really is just the case of the reeds are often dying back when people are complaining, or they're looking a bit brown, but of course they reshoot and come back very vigorously. To combat that, we do try to use other species such as Schonoplectus validus and Schonoplectus pungens to try and keep a bit of green in the wetlands all the time. But certainly in terms of helping to just flow through the wetlands, the Phragmites australis is far and away the best reed, I guess, for the functionality of the wetlands.
Great. In terms of the biofilters, I've got a question here that's come, I think this is one that we'll try and get from WA, is biofilters are more expensive to maintain than an open water wetland. Is it an equivalent volume of water treated? So that's one that's come through to us.
I can have a crack.
So the original intent.
Go
ahead. You go for it.
Do you want to have a go, Rob, and then we'll
okay. Well, I guess if you hold up wetlands next to biofilters in terms of how much water they treat, you only need a footprint of about 5% of a wetland to treat the same amount of water with the biofilter. So while they're more expensive per square metre to maintain, you need a much smaller area to treat the same amount of water. Wetlands typically will have a 48 to 72 hour detention time at least, whereas the biofilters, it's a matter of hours that water moves through. And particularly at Unity Park, where we used relatively high permeability soils, they were sort of 300 to 400 millimetres an hour saturated hydraulic conductivity. And we've measured that flow, so we know they can process the water at that sort of rate. The other thing you need to remember with biofilters is they can't be continuously loaded, so you need to have essentially spare cells to enable the flow to be rotated between them. So if they flow too continuously, then you have problems with the algae growing over the surface. So
like
Bruce,
farming.
did you want to add to that? Yeah.
Bruce, did you want to add your views over that one?
Yeah, so that's the key thing with the biofilter, is that you can't squeeze them into so many spaces that you simply wouldn't be able to do with a wetland. And it's interesting, a lot of people say that, a lot of councils claim they just haven't got the space, but it's really quite interesting when you really start looking at some of these inner suburbs. It's amazing where you can actually find space. And so that's one of the things that we try to demonstrate with this Unity Park project. Most people seem to think you've got to put everything in the one site, but our harvest point is actually several kilometres away from the treatment wetlands. And then our biofilters are several hundred metres from the wetlands, and the Mar wellfield, the managed recharge wellfield, is tucked on a road verge, which is another 3 to 4 kilometres further downstream. And so we were trying to demonstrate the cost of plastic pipe is actually quite small when you're looking at the overall project, and you can easily just pick up little pockets of land in all sorts of spaces. And in fact, one of the most interesting ones was that we purchased the backyard of a factory and actually cleaned up their graveyard, if you like. So a lot of factories have what they call their graveyard, where they keep their old machinery. And we actually offered to clean it up for them, and then purchased half of their backyard off them, and that's where we built our pumps. So there's all sorts of little issues that you can find to build these things, and the biofilter just is another one of the tools in your toolbox, and gives you a lot more versatility when you're designing a system.
So on that issue of cost, we've got a question that's come in from WA. It says, what's the charge to the customer for the recycled water, and for comparison, how does that compare with the potable water?
So we price in accordance with National Water Initiative pricing principles, and so we use a similar approach to what the major utilities do, and so that's basically a full cost recovery model. User pays, and the result is that our price is actually virtually identical to mains water. Certainly, whilst we're a fairly large-scale operation when it comes to urban stormwater, and that we're selling about 2.5 gigalitres, we're still only a micro utility in comparison to your state water utilities like SA Water. So we certainly don't have the economies of scale they can bring to bear. And so when you're doing that full cost recovery pricing and on such a small scale, then inevitably your prices are high. Labour-wise, energy-wise, we're far better. We're quite competitive, but at the end of the day, it's just that the sheer scale that we're operating at that puts us at a disadvantage. So the crucial thing for all of our stormwater harvesting schemes is that we get more bulk. We've got to scale up and start to get that scale into our operations, and in that way you can get the price down.
Yeah, in a related question, I think, Bruce, we've had someone ask, obviously, we're asking when you started the scheme and what was the trigger for council to sort of take on the risk in providing that service, which is obviously not a traditional business. You're not a traditional business unit in your typical council to have a water utility within the council. So what was the trigger and when did that start?
So going right back into the history, sort of well before my time even, I've been around for 20 odd years, but it was early to mid 90s. We've got records of the landscape architects actually writing about the cost to irrigate public open space. So back, I guess, the early 90s, they were under a lot of pressure from the community to green up the public open space. And if anyone has was over in Salisbury some 30 years ago. I was actually just coming down from Queensland, and of course it was a bit of a shock, getting off the plane and driving out through the northern Adelaide Plains was quite a shock to me, in that the little bit of green areas that Adelaide had were just a completely different shade of green to Queensland, but there was also these great swathes of very dusty, dry plains. And so over the last 30 years, certainly Salisbury and some of the other Northern Adelaide councils have transformed that suburban area. Certainly the amount of public open space that's under irrigation is massively increased. And we do spend close to $3 million on irrigating. So that's just in Salisbury with a population of about 130,000 people. So it's a fairly significant irrigation bill, if you like, to keep that public open space green. And so it was that pressure back in the early 90s that really drove council into looking at alternatives, looking at what they could do to keep their public open space green at the lowest possible price. And of course, at the same time, the stormwater engineers were trying to sort out a lot of local flooding issues. And so it was just the two issues coming together.
Right, yeah, multiple objectives. That's great. I've got one for you, Rob, that's come through. Said here, did the project calculate and provide for ecological water requirements for receiving environments before designing the harvesting scheme? I don't know if that's something you can talk about at the scale of the project, the Unity Park, or the broader one. Maybe if you could comment on Unity Park, and if Bruce, you could comment on the broader scheme.
In terms of environmental flow releases, is that the gist of the question?
I think that's where they're coming from.
Yeah, from recollection, this is a long time ago, we were really involved in the treatment side of the harvesting, less so the offtake from the creek, which was an existing system that offtakes from the creek. But it only takes a small portion of the flow. So it pumps at about 100 litres a second from the original offtake point. And this is a large catchment, so it's only taking a small portion of the flow. Most of it is going past. And it's only triggered as the creek levels rise up. It's a natural creek bed flowing to the harvest point. So I don't think it was specifically designed, but by default there is releases before there's any offtake.
So in terms of the maintenance, obviously people are concerned about maintenance costs. And how have you optimised that? And what have you been lessons learned about optimising, your biofilters versus your wetlands, and running a system where you can have an affordable maintenance program?
In terms of just reducing the effort. The simple fact is you've got to do it. You've got no choice really, and it depends a lot on the flow regime. So when you're harvesting, especially here in Adelaide, you might only get 70 or 80 days of harvestable during the year. So you've just got to go like crazy to get as much as you can when there's good flows. And so you are tending to load those biofilters up quite heavily, and so we can get quite rapid biofilm growth on the biofilters, and you've just got no choice. You've just got to get in and break that up or remove it. I think the comment more about the increased maintenance regime is that during the dry months, you've got a lot more issues with weeds and grasses and so forth. So you're constantly having to treat them as a parkland, if you like, with a more intensive maintenance regime, whereas your wetlands, you don't tend to have to do quite as much. Pretty much the wetland looks after itself for 3 to 4 years. You might have to have a program every 3rd or 4th year to desilt. Generally, you haven't got that ongoing mowing and litter removal and so forth. So the wetland is a more self-sufficient system.
Got another one for Rob. You've obviously deal with a lot of streetscape biofilters, and this is probably the sort of most industrial size sort of biofilter that I understand you might have worked with. What have you learned from it as a designer in terms of doing it at this scale?
Well, we've done many more big ones since this one, and it's worthwhile remembering, and you probably see in the video that this was really set up as a research system. We've got 6 rectilinear biofilter cells. They weren't really designed to be integrated into the landscape and add that kind of social value. So, but in terms of streetscape systems and larger ones, the functionality really is no different. The cost for biofilters on a larger scale is much more effective than it is at streetscape sort of scale. But in terms of larger systems, the fundamentals of how they work are still maintained. And the beauty of large biofilters is their shape can be flexible and not as rectilinear as the systems at Unity Park. But Unity Park was done deliberately because they're all configured for research and they all needed to be replicates of each other, with slight variations of filter media and saturated zones and so on. So in terms of scalability, they're it's very easy to scale up biofilters, and it's just about getting even flow distribution across them and so on, which needs a bit of consideration.
Thank you. We've got a couple of other questions that we couldn't get to today. We're getting them wind up because we're about to pan over to another event, I understand. So there are questions about non-market benefits, etc. So we might try and catch them up in a chat outside of this session. So I just wanted to really thank Robin and Bruce for joining us today and sharing their story with us with the video as well. Thanks a lot, guys.
Well, that's it for today. Hopefully you've enjoyed our first day of our 5th Water Sensitive Cities Conference. If you're like me, you've thoroughly enjoyed the videos. I'm super impressed with what has been produced there. A few people have asked us questions about whether they'll be available after the conference. And look, the answer is yes. Just give us a few days before we post them online. In terms of tomorrow we head into what we call our state-based conference days. So for each one of those days, you'll go to a specific venue in your state. Those who are in Perth are already there at Crown at the moment. Other states, have a look in your program to see what you're going to be doing. The only exception is Victoria. Due to COVID restrictions, we're doing Victoria fully online, but every other state, make sure you come along in person. We've got a full day of activities. Those days are going to focus on case studies in each particular state, but we do have a national cross. We're going to have Ben, our CEO, do the official opening remarks that will be broadcast live, and also our second keynote speaker, which I introduced this morning. We then finish the day with a panel session, an interactive session with some of our researchers, looking at our integrated case studies. This one we talk specifically about our research and how we've applied it and what the lessons are at the end of our 9 years as a CRC. So look, I think that's about it. Hopefully you've enjoyed things. As I said, use the chat function tomorrow. When you're in room, by all means come along, participate, do those sorts of things. And for those who've registered for our dinner, we look forward to seeing you there to celebrate 9 years of the CRC. So for today, that's all. We're going to sign off and we hope to see you tomorrow. Thanks again. Cheers.